Hey everyone, it's your host Marcus Norman of Gentleman Style Podcast Show. And today we are going to be talking about talking, but not just any talking, how to master public speaking. And we are going to take your speaking to the next level. And I couldn't think of the better man to bring to the stage here today with me. This man is the true master of speaking, and he's going to help us take our game to the next level. You won't want to miss 1 second of what he has in store. Stay with us. Here we go. Hey everyone, I'm your host Marcus Norman of Gentleman Style Podcast Show, and today I have Brenden. This man is a legend in the talking industry. His podcast, his YouTube channel are blowing up, and he's helping adults and children alike grow in their speaking. He has a famous saying, I believe the next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl who can't afford to communicate and needs a communication coach to take her to the next level. So it's his duty to help her succeed with his free resources. That is inspiring, and this man has a true heart of gold. And after many years of doing presentations and working on his craft, sharpening his tool, he is here to give back on the Gentleman Style Podcast stage. So I can't hold this man back any further. Help me welcome to the stage Mr. Brenden. Welcome. How are you, sir?
Very good, Marcus. You clearly don't need any of the tips I'm going to be talking about today.
Absolutely not true. Leaders are always learning and growing. I appreciate you, brother. Leaders are always learning. So I am here to take notes. I got my notepad, and we have to dive in because you, sir, are the T. You are goals in the speaking industry, and we need to learn what you're putting down. You're huge, so thank you for being here.
Oh, the pleasure is absolutely mine, Marcus. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, sir, diving right in, when did you first get the notion for public speaking? When did you know that you got the gift, brother?
Funny, Marcus, it was actually very recently in my life that I realized I was even decent at communication, because most of it I sucked. And the reason I sucked is because I grew up in a city called Montreal in Canada. And for those who don't know, Montreal is a city where you need to know how to speak French. Except I didn't know the language, Marcus. So my whole life, not only did I struggle with communication, I had to present in a language I didn't even know. So imagine being in a first and second grade classroom, I'm looking at the crowd, I'm going, bonjour. And that was my life growing up as a kid. But how MasterTalk got started, Marcus, was later in life, probably 15, 17 years later, when I was in business school. I went to college for it. I did these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age were playing basketball or rugby or football, I wasn't one of those guys. So I did competitions professionally that were presentation related, and that's how I learned how to speak. And then as I got older, I started coaching students who were younger than me, not because I was a great coach, because the alternative they had was a rock, frankly, so they picked me. I helped them out, got really good, and then I accidentally stumbled upon the idea for the YouTube channel, and that's how I grew it from there.
Makes sense. Makes sense. We have a question from our audience member, Same Difference Podcast, a great podcast. You guys must check them out. He asks, Mr. Brenden, I'm going to tee you up for this. Why do you think communication is so necessary yet so hard for most people?
Absolutely, Marcus. So there's two parts to that question, so let's tackle both. The first one is, why is it hard? So I've thought about this question a lot, and the answer that I've come to is it makes a lot of sense if you think about it, Marcus. So let's think about it. Where do we learn how to communicate ideas, how to present them specifically in presentations? The answer is school. High school, elementary school. That's where a lot of those conversations begin. But here's the problem. This is where the rubber meets the road. All of those presentations, Marcus, have three main problems. The first one is all of them are mandatory. We don't wake up one morning and say, hey, Marcus, you want to get breakfast and present all day? Nobody says that. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is all of those presentations are different. Nobody wakes up and says, what are you passionate about, Marcus? Do you like podcasting? Do you like menswear? Do you like being a gentleman? Let's make a presentation on that when you're 12 years old. No, you got to talk about Shakespearean poetry, and that's your life. You don't have a choice. You got to do it. And then you have to talk about the history of Missouri. You're like, I don't even live in Missouri. What is this? And that's the presentation system we're in. And then the third piece is all of those presentations are tied to a punishment. So every time you don't do a great job in the education system, you don't get a pat on the back, you get a slap in the face. And that's the way that we're conditioning our children and ourselves, frankly, to grow up believing that communication is a chore, that communication is something we don't want to do, and nobody wants to get better at doing the dishes. That's why it's hard. But why is it necessary? It's necessary because it impacts every area of our life. It's not just about getting the job promotion or doing well on a podcast or growing our businesses. It's the way that we talk to our families. It's the way that we order food at a restaurant. It's the way that we travel and meet strangers. And when we realize that communication is about leading a more fulfilling life, we start to ask a different question around communication, which is, how would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator?
Whew. Drop the mic on that one. That's huge. That's huge. And that is so, and you're right. Same difference. That's facts. Hardcore facts. He's spilling the tea on Gentleman Style Podcast Show. And I'm taking, like I said, the beauty of podcasting is I get to take notes and enjoy this for my benefit. So that's selfish. That's a selfish part of me. I'm spilling some tea on myself. Mr. Brenden, sir, I need your help. What should I start doing today? What should people in the audience start doing tomorrow to improve their public speaking if they really need to dial this in and they really need to hard focus? What should they do tomorrow? What tips can they do?
Absolutely, brother. So now that we've established the importance of dreaming about our communication skills, the next step to figure out is what I call my easy threes. Communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time, Marcus. And if we try and juggle all 18, what's going to happen? All of them are going to fall to the ground. So not the best way of approaching it. So instead, what we want to do is ask ourselves the following question. What are the three easiest balls that we can juggle that can allow us to build momentum with communication? So let's dive into them. First ball, the random word exercise. Pick a random word like sofa, like couch, like pistachio, like ammo, and create random presentations out of thin air with no preparation. And what I always tell my clients, Marcus, is if you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. So practice the random word exercise a few times a day and build your momentum as a communicator. And what's great about the random word exercise, Marcus, is you can make your own family your accountability system. You can do this with your significant other, your kids, if you have any, nieces, nephews, family members. So that way you're always practicing this in the car instead of listening to music. That's ball number one. Ball number two is the question drill. We get asked questions all the time in our life, Marcus. On a podcast, on a show, at work, at school, we get asked questions all the time. But most of us are reactive to those questions. We're not proactive. We wait for the question to appear, and then when the question comes, we answer it. I'll tell you a quick story on this. A few years ago, when I started guesting on podcasts and I had no clue what I was doing, somebody asked me the funniest question. He said, Brenden, where does the fear of communication come from? And I look at the guy and I'm like, I don't know, man. Los Angeles, San Diego, you tell me. So I was very reactive, not proactive. So every single day, Marcus, for 5 minutes, that's all I ask. I asked one question that I thought somebody would ask me about communication, and I wrote down an answer. But I did that every day for years. Now, Marcus, with only 5 minutes a day, if you do this once a day for a year, you'll have answered 365 questions about your industry. You'll be bulletproof. And finally, number three, the video message. It's so simple, nobody does it. Make a list of the people that you love the most in your life. Your friends, your family, your aunts, your uncles, your niece, your nephews, your clients if you're a business owner. And ask yourself a simple question. When was the last time you sent them a video message that was 20 seconds just telling them how much you appreciate and love having them in your life. And that's what communication teaches us, especially that last ball about what communication is for. Communication is not a chore, but rather a way for us to create impact. So start sending video messages to the people that you love the most in your life.
This is the tea. This is what we've been waiting for. If you are struggling to take your talk, your communication, your master talk to the next level, I have the man, the myth, the legend here today, Mr. Brenden of MasterTalk. Love it. Love it. We have another question. I love it. Same Difference Podcast is right back at you. They want to take their master talk to the next level. What should we do to be better and relate to people that are not good communicators? What can we do to improve that?
That's a great question, Same Difference Podcast. Absolutely. What should we do to better relate to people that are not good communicators? Here's what I would do. The first step is to focus on people who are good at communication. You know, one of my mentors tells me best, if you can't argue the small things in life, you can't argue the big things. So start by improving the way that you communicate with people in general, especially with people you already get along with. That's step number one. It's missed. And what I mean here is very specific, Marcus. I don't mean just communicate better with the people around you. I'm actually a lot more specific. Learn how to set very healthy boundaries, learn how to communicate specific boundaries with them, manage your vocals, mirror the energy effectively. So, for example, you and I have the same energy. You're an extroverted guy, you have high energy, and I do too. But there's sometimes when I'm on a podcast and the person is equally as talented as you, but they're a lot more introverted. So they'll get on a show and they'll say, "Oh, Brenden, it's great to see you." But they're just as prepped. They're just as ready. But it's up to me. It's my responsibility to change my energy to adapt to that person and to make them to feel more comfortable. Where I might go from this to, "Paul, is this your first show? Let's take it one question at a time. More than happy to be on your show, and I'm so happy to be here," right? So notice how my energy shifted there. But we need to start the people who are comfortable first. And we need to get better with them. The other piece is going back to how do we better relate. I think the biggest one is energy and powerful questions. So the first example I just did, you just saw me change energies really quickly. And that's not about being manipulative. It's about being and having the empathy for the people that are around us, making them feel comfortable. That's always my angle. And the other piece to relating to people is asking them powerful questions. You know, Dale Carnegie always says the person who is the most interesting is not always the person who talks the most, but rather is the most interested in other people. So ask them powerful questions and lean on them and make them feel like VIPs. And that's the best way you do this over time.
I love that. I love that. That gives me the vibe. I hope that answers your question. Same Different Pocket. It definitely answers my. I can't write fast enough. I can't take notes fast enough on this. This is tea, and I love it, love it, love it. Nikki Brown loves it too. We appreciate it. You thank you for being here. Nikki is our VIP sponsor of the Gentleman Style Podcast Show, and we love you. Thank you for being here today. Dropping huge gems today. Love it, love it, love it. Sir, I need your help because there are different medians to communication. We learned this is high school stuff, right? But we need you to take us to master talk level, right? There are different mediums of communication. There's over the phone, there's body language, there's online. How can we communicate or how should we change up our master talk when communicating virtually? Because COVID-19 ruined everything.
But powerful question, Marcus. I love it. So let's go through a principle and then let's talk about virtual. So what's the principle? The principle is this, Marcus. One medium at a time. It's one thing to do really well at presentations. It's another to know how to guest on a podcast. It's another one to know how to host one as exceptionally as you are doing right now. And it's another one to know how to present well on video. But if we try and juggle all 18 mediums at the same time, it's all going to fall to the floor. So let's focus on just online, but the key is really one domino at a time. So with online, all we need to know is that there's three main differences between online and offline. So let's tackle them. The first one is eye contact. If you're in person with somebody, Marcus, all you have to do is move your head around to the different people in your boardroom, in the people around you, and you have to move your eyes around, your body around. Whereas when you're in person, or rather online, whether you're speaking to 1 or 10,000 people, you're actually only supposed to look in one area, which is the camera lens. So that way you can stare at all 10,000 or all 500 people or all 7 people at the same time. So that's difference number one. You could put like a sticky note next to the camera lens that has like an arrow saying look here or else. That's a fun one. You put a picture of your family, picture of your favorite food, and put it next to the lens. That's number one. Number two is energy. At the end of the day, Marcus, by the way, the energy in this podcast is already off the chain. Imagine if we're in person, the whole building would just blow up, right? So it's hard to replicate the energy that you have in person because you can get lunch with people after, you can talk to them, you give them a hug, give them a handshake. It's just a lot harder to do in person, I mean, online, because there's not that level of pressure. Because when you're online, you could just say, well, my meeting's at 10. Do I really need a shower? Do I really need to put pants on because nobody sees it? Right? But that's the thing. There's not that level of commitment. So what's the advice? The advice is bring more energy in person and transfer as much of that energy as possible back online. The only reason I'm able to speak at a high level energetically here in this medium is because my energy is 10 times more stronger when I'm offline. So you got to bring more of that here. Finally, number three, accessibility. It's a lot easier to talk to your audience when you're offline, when you're in person, because you can get lunch with people after. There's no friction. But online, there's a ton of friction because when the Zoom call is over, you don't get to talk to people anymore. So instead, what you want to do is get on calls, meet your audience, have discussions with them, so that at the end, when you're done your presentation, you can bring those relationships offline and get the insights you need, the feedback you need to make yourself better next time.
Woo! On fire. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I love this. Sir, Brenden, you are giving me this. You can't get this anywhere except on MasterTalk on his channel. And I just became a member. I was literally taking notes and loving this and eating this all up. You can't get this anywhere. This man is truly the man to get on anybody's podcast. He is absolutely all about MasterTalk. And congratulations, by the way, he just gained the trademark and the licensing to MasterTalk. So kudos and shout out to that. Oh my gosh. Loving it.
Thank you, man.
Loving it. Loving it. Sir, what about children? Because this communication isn't just an adult thing. You actually coach children. What are some of the tips or struggles that you see children are having in order to to bring out that master talk in them? What are some tips or secrets with them? Can you share?
Yeah, absolutely, Marcus. So for me, the key is whenever we're coaching kids, the reason I did it is not for money, obviously. It's because it allows me to learn a lot of key lessons that I can apply for the rest of the world. Because that's my mission at the end of the day, that you said so eloquently well. The next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl somewhere around the world. So I need to know how to coach them so I can teach and make my videos as simple as possible. That's the rationale as to why I do it. In terms of what I learned, there's a couple of things. I would say the most important one is that kids can definitely become exceptional communicators very easily. And I'll tell you why. The reason it's so easy is because they don't have that fear of judgment, that fear of rejection. I talked about the random word exercise earlier, Marcus. It's so hard to get parents to do this exercise, to get my executives to do it, because they have so many limiting beliefs that I kind of have to pressure. I got to like hit them with a little elbow, with a little shoulder there to force them to do it. Kids don't have that problem. When you're 5 years old, you don't even know what a presentation is. You just go, oh, okay, orange is a fruit, and they just present. They don't really think too much about it. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So there's a lot we can learn from kids. But in terms of what educators and parents can do right now to improve the lives of their children in communication, it's actually very simple. Number one, the next time they want something, like a PS4, a controller, a video game, a candy bar, force them to make a 5-minute presentation or a small speech explaining why you should buy them something. And two things will happen. Either one, they'll say, I don't want to do the presentation, and you'll save hundreds of dollars. So that's an easy tip to save you money. But the second thing is generally, Marcus, sometimes if the kid really wants it, they'll actually spend the time making the presentation and blow your mind and take your feedback until it's better. So we're tying an incentive to what the kid actually wants. I did this once. Their parents didn't like me too much for it. That they wanted a dog. Essentially, the kid wanted a dog, but their parents didn't want to buy them a dog. So we actually created a presentation for this 12-year-old kid, where he worked on it like crazy, and they got him a dog because he was so convincing in the message that he was sharing. So that's one piece, is tie the incentive. The other piece to keep in mind is to include them in a topic they want to present. The education system is ruining our kids, especially from a communication perspective, because we're forcing them to talk about something they don't want to talk about versus going, what do you like? And have them share whatever they care about. So that way they're more excited about it. So that's the second piece of advice. The final piece of advice I have is get kids involved with giving feedback to each other. Even if I will give advice to kids, it's not the most effective. It might be effective now because I look young, but that won't work in like 10 years when I'm much older. So, what I've advised parents to do is get a group of kids together, a small group, and have them give feedback to each other. Because when they give feedback to each other, they then take the role of the teacher and they become much more mature, which means they'll apply the feedback that they're giving other people to themselves.
I don't know if I like this. I don't know if I like this because now I really don't want a dog. Now you taught my child to get me to convince me to buy this dog. I don't. I'm gonna just edit that part out. No, I'm just kidding. That was great. That was great, sir. That is huge. And you brought this up earlier. You brought up there's a difference between introverts and extroverts, right? And that is a significant problem. And in your master talks, you're not necessarily trying to change people from who they are, but how can someone who's introverted still be a master talk speaker? How can they still bring out and shine in a, whether it is online platform or in a group setting?
Yeah, absolutely, Marcus. Fantastic question. So here's the piece that I want to keep in mind with introverts. Some of my best clients in the history of my career, I've been doing this for 7 years now, I have been introverts. And that's what's interesting, is that introverts are often better communicators. They just don't realize it. So here's my advice: understand your strengths. Primarily three things. Number one, introverts are exceptional listeners, Marcus. They're a lot better at listening than extroverts are. I talk a lot, whereas an introvert will sit there because they spend less time speaking. So they'll listen to what the other person is saying and they'll adapt the message much faster than an extrovert can. Number two, pausing. Pausing is the foundational element of communication. And guess what? Introverts can pause like it's nobody's business easily because they speak less on average. So because they speak less, they're able to pause more and it's easier for them because they're comfortable in silence. Not so much for extroverts. People like me, when I'm at a party, I'm at a bar, and I'm talking to somebody, if they're speaking to me and there's a lapse in the conversation, I immediately want to fill up. Oh, what's your favorite color, Marcus? I always want to fill up the pause, whereas introverts don't have that problem. Finally, number three, and this is not well known, so pay attention to this one. Introverts are actually a lot more accessible as communicators than extroverts. What do I mean here? Let's compare Gary Vaynerchuk to Brene Brown for a second. I'm a big fan of Gary Vaynerchuk, big fan of his work, big respect, lots of admiration for what he's done in his brand. That's why I like to mention him because I know he wouldn't mind. He's an extroverted speaker. People either really like the guy or they really don't. You're either on one side of the fence or you're the other with Gary V. You're not in the middle. So he alienates a large percentage of the human population. Brene Brown doesn't have that problem. Nobody has said in the history of podcasting, at least that I know of, has said the following words: I hate Brene Brown. If you say that, you go to jail. The FBI is going to come after you. The CIA is going to arrest you and your family. Obviously, I love Brene Brown. I love her work. I said that mostly as a joke, but I also said it to prove a point. When you're more introverted, you actually become more accessible. So what's the punch? The punchline is you got a lot of advantages as an introvert, and you just got to leverage them and win.
Sir, I'm a big fanatic, and a lot of the people that sign in and subscribe to the Gentleman Style Podcast are avid readers. What are some books that you recommend that people go check out today to become better speakers and better MasterTalk speakers?
Absolutely, Marcus. The book that I recommend is a book called Thirst by Scott Harrison. Scott Harrison is the CEO of Charity Water. It's a nonprofit he started to help the world gain access to clean drinking water. And the reason I love Scott's work, especially in the context of this podcast, is because Thirst, his memoir, is a great example, a practical example, Marcus, of someone who used communication and storytelling to fundamentally change the world. You know, the guy used to be a nightclub promoter in New York City in his 20s, and he went on to build the largest water charity in the world, and definitely in America. And Charity Water's brand wouldn't have been possible without storytelling and comms. And he really breaks down how he got from A to Z in the book. And there's a great quote in the book that I always like to give out on the podcast. And the quote is this, by Pope Francis: "All it takes in the world to have hope is one person. And why can't that person be you?"
Sir, you are incredible. Mic drop, mic drop. If I had another mic, I'd give it to him so he could drop it. Sir, you are incredible. How can my audience tune in and connect with MasterTalk?
Absolutely, Mark. You did such a phenomenal job. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast. It's great. So 2 ways to keep in touch. The first one is the MasterTalk YouTube channel. Go to MasterTalk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas effectively. And the second way is attend my free training. I do a free Zoom call every 3 weeks. It's a fun workshop. It's live, it's interactive, it's fun. And if you want to join that, all you have to do is go to rockstarcommunicator.com.
Check him out, y'all. The man, the myth, the legend, spilling the tea on Gentleman Style Podcast Show. And we got to put him in, bring him back up to the big screen. Bring up that YouTube channel. Connect, and check out what he's doing on MasterTalk and take your speaking to the next level, because that's how we achieve more. Speakers, part of leadership is public speaking. So you got to get better. Whether you're introverted, extroverted, whether you're 10 years old or 50 years old, you can do this. Mr. Brenden, any final nuggets that you can leave my audience with?
Absolutely. I would say don't forget the question, Marcus, and everyone else listening to this. How would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? Don't sidestep it. Spend 15 minutes and really reflect on the answer, because if you do, you'll get excited. You'll get motivated to actually work on your communication skills and take it seriously. So spend that 15 minutes and you might just change the world in the process.
We got to let Mr. Brenden go. He has many more lives to change, but we love you guys. Like I always end every show, take care of your friends, take care of your family, and always, always take care of business. Love you guys. Bye.